Welcome to Tell Your Story, the podcast. We are your co-hosts, Jenny McIntyre, pastor and emotional intelligence coach, and Marybeth Steigenga, counselor and relationship coach. We believe that everyone has an extraordinary story to share. Together, we invite you to embark on a journey of self-discovery as we unravel the profound wisdom that lies in looking back to propel us forward. Prepare to be moved and inspired by tales of unwavering resilience, personal growth, and the pursuit of authentic living, including your own. Join us as we delve into the transformative power of storytelling. Because when you tell your story, you have the potential to change your life. And make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast so you can be inspired.
Okay, welcome everybody to episode number 3. And I'm excited to see my friend Jenny again. And today we're going to talk about tying our two stories together. So taking our story timelines and intersecting them, and we're going to throw in some good stuff about being vulnerable and how that helps you heal and all that good stuff. So how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, Marybeth. It's always a treat to see you and spend time together, even if from a distance. I don't know if we've told our friends that we are separated by, how many miles do you think we're separated by?
I don't know. Arizona to Florida. Somebody who's good at geography could tell me that, but
Yeah.
it's a long.
We'll just have to wait for our friends to tell us, right? Because we don't want to Google it right now.
No, I'm not going to Google it right now. Exactly.
Well,
Yes.
Marybeth is in Arizona and I am in Florida, and we originally met in Florida. And we have titled this episode When Tears Shower Your Mess. Because as you guys know, I was a narcissist interrupted, but when I started working with Marybeth, tears started flowing because I discovered so much loss and so much ignorance in me and how much I needed to grow. And I think tears are a pretty recurring thing in my life. And Marybeth, as you guys remember, spoke to us about her life being a mess. So we have entitled this episode, When Tears Shower Your Mess. And we're going to talk about how we met and how our lives intersected.
Yes. Yeah. We met at a very crazy time. I mean, in my life, and in your life, right? It was one of those things where it's like, it was destiny or fate or the Lord putting us together.
Divine appointment.
Yep, divine appointment. So yeah, I was recovering from, I had a MRSA infection, and I had been in the hospital. I think that's when I first got the phone call to maybe meet with you guys. I was still in the hospital, but I was
by John,
yes.
Remember my husband. And you had an accident at the gym too.
Yeah, that's what started it all. I was going to turn 40, and my motto was fit by 40. I wanted to be fit by 40. So I was in the gym and I was doing a Romanian deadlift, and I herniated 2 discs. And so in my back. So I remember that day I hit the floor in the gym, and I went to the hospital by ambulance because I couldn't walk. And then I ended up, that was a year before I met you. And then I ended up trying to recover from that. It was crazy. And then ended up with back surgery because I couldn't deal with the pain. And then in the surgery, I got the MRSA infection, and then ended up in the hospital on IV antibiotics. And it was a crazy story. So.
And I remember John telling me, I found this amazing marriage counselor, and he said, I told her we were desperate, and she told me that she's not seeing any patients right now because she's just recovering, but that she would make an exception for us. And we were truly desperate, by the way. I pretty much had given John an ultimatum. We had hit a very, very bad spot in our marriage. I was pregnant with JC, my now 16-year-old son, and I was feeling so emotionally bad that I ended up almost having a miscarriage. And there was nothing physically wrong with me. It was just, I was feeling emotionally detached from my husband. He was giving me the cold shoulder. I had no idea what it was. So you know where our minds immediately go, right? I'm like, is he no longer in love with me? Is he seeing somebody else? And I would learn a little later through Marybeth that none of it was the case, that there was something entirely different going on. I also at that time felt like a victim. I felt like my husband was taking me for granted. And, I had left my country because I'm originally from Panama, as you guys already know. So I was like, this is not what I signed up for. So I remember telling John, I said, hey, I've been putting up with this dysfunctional relationship since we got married for a while, right? But now I'm pregnant and I almost lost my baby. And so now this is affecting not only us, but it's affecting the life of my baby. And I mean, not that Astrid, who by then was around 4 years old, was not indirectly influenced. But I think what really, really grabbed me was the fact that although there was nothing physically wrong with me, except, back pain, sciatica, and stuff like that, I had almost lost my baby because of all the emotional pain I was in. And so I told John, I said, we need to fix this. What are you going to do about it? Because John and I loved each other. That's the worst part. We loved each other, but we just couldn't get along. So we were serving the Lord together. So it was very, very bizarre. We're like, if we end up separating, people are going to be in shock because we truly, genuinely loved each other, liked each other, liked spending time together. So unless we were having a John Jenny crisis before the world, we were a cool couple and a couple that was very loving, and we didn't even have to pretend that was truly the case. And so all that to say that I told John, we need to do something and we need to do something now. We can't continue this way. And that is when he reaches out to you, Marybeth, and take it away from there.
Yeah. And I was thinking about both of you guys. You've heard your trauma story, right? Of growing up, and your husband also grew up in a family with some trauma, right? So the two of you come together, and sure, you fall in love and you love each other, but you have these very powerful stories underneath that you really weren't aware of how they were affecting you. And so it causes all those old wounds to come up. It triggers the old wounds, right? Like some of the stuff you had going on with John was as a result of your wounds from your parents, right? And so it didn't necessarily have to do with John.
Absolutely.
It had to do with what was going on under the surface. And the same thing with John, things you would do would trigger those old wounds, and it didn't necessarily have to do with you.
Exactly. Yeah, one of the things that Marybeth taught me, I mean, you've taught me so many things, but I think that we started talking about healing is a choice. You started talking about boundaries, which as I said in the last episode, you asked me, I think you need help in the area of boundaries. And I asked, what is boundaries? Well, and it's a combination of ignorance, but it's also a combination of the fact that English was not my first language too. So it was a combination of both things. But I guess because we're trying to connect our stories, I have a question for you, Marybeth. Back then, you were our therapist and you were treating us, right? When I arrived to your office with my arms crossed in front of my chest, 100% convinced that it was all John's fault and that I was going to be vindicated in these sessions as the sacrificial, amazing wife that is being neglected by her husband, right? So we get there, and obviously you focus on us. But in as much as we're trying to marry our stories together and talk about when tears shower your mess, what's going on at that point in your life? And because obviously we couldn't talk about that then because our relationship was purely professional. So tell us a little bit about you, how you were feeling. I mean, you're going through this accident, you're recovering, you're seeing this messed up couple.
And what's going on in my life in the background is, right, I think I was using a walker the first time that you came.
Yes, you were.
So I was going through this whole other, almost a grieving experience of, I didn't know if I was ever gonna fully recover and be able to resume my life. And I had, let's see, at that time, my goodness, I can't even think if that was like 16 years ago. Was that 16 years ago? 10 years ago.
No, 16. Because JC, I was very pregnant of JC, and JC was born shortly thereafter. And JC
Okay, so
turned 16.
Okay, so I had two kids. Yeah, that's right. I had a kid in elementary and a kid in middle school and a kid in freshman year in high school. So I had three kids at home with a mom who couldn't walk, who was pretty depressed herself because didn't know like how I was in constant pain. Like I just didn't, I was like, is this going to be my life? So that was going on underneath. I also have a husband who is amazing. I don't want to say anything mean about him, but I will say this mean thing about him. He's not good at empathy. So he, like, during that time, he was taking care of the house and doing things with the kids and managing all of that, but not emotionally supporting me in my
Moment of grief.
Right. He's just not. And that theme continued throughout our marriage. And yeah, I can tell lots of stories about that and how that impacted. So that's all going underneath the surface. And yet I came to the office. I remember coming and letting you guys into the front door, and your energy, I could feel your energy. Like it was just anger. You just were like anger and almost like, I'm just doing this because we need to, but I really don't even think this is going to work type of a thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a combination. And I think in a lot of ways, we both are that, like we all are that way. It's like there was a part of me that really needed this to work because I did not want my babies to grow up without a dad. And I did not want to continue, like literally, Marybeth, you may not know this, but when I came to see you, I was wearing a wig because my hair, the stress was so much that my hair was literally falling. I had like patches of holes on my. So going back to what you're saying, I think there was a part of me that desperately wanted this to work, but then there was another part of me that was like, I don't know if this is going to work. I mean, it felt like an impossibility, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it was very interesting, and that was newer in my career as a counselor too. Like that was a newer thing. So I feel like I don't know if I gave you my best at that time, but I was trying.
Well, you sure did. One of the first things you told me, which captured my attention and which I have quoted ever since. Every time Joan and I would work with a couple, we would start by talking about our own story. And I would say, let me just quote our first marriage therapist, Marybeth Steigenga. And I would say, you can win this fight or you can save your relationship. I'm not sure that you're going to be able to do both. And when you said that really, it put two options in front of me. And I had to choose. And in my heart, I was like, no, like I want more to save my relationship than I want to win this fight. But I think I needed someone to confront me with that, to like put it in front of me as two options so that I would be very clear as to what my decisions were. And I think this takes us back to the conversation we were having in our first two episodes, where we're talking about how healing is a choice that we must make. And I mean, ideally, our listeners are grasping this from our stories, that at some point in our lives, in spite of the adversity, in spite of the problems we were facing, we had to make a decision. I mean, you could have decided, Marybeth, to stay in bed, sad and depressed because you were in pain and you didn't know what the future held, and your husband was not the most empathetic. And I could have decided to just stay angry. And literally, I had a separate account and I was saving money. And I had told John, I'm leaving. I'm going back to Panama. You're the reason I'm here in the United States and you're making my life so miserable, But we both, in our own ways, made a decision that we were not going to stay down. In my case and John, we decided to go to a marriage counselor. In your case, you said, I feel really bad, but I'm going to get up, I'm going to work, I'm going to try to help this couple, and the rest is history.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you do. It is, healing is a choice. And not that makes it easy. The journey of healing does not come easy, but you do have to make that choice. And I do think there is power in that, right? There's power. We do have the choice. You do not have to stay in the victim mode. And I do love that, and I use that in my marriage all the time too, because sometimes when your spouse does something to you that you feel is wrong, right? You want to win that fight. Like, I'm going to win this. I'm right, you're wrong. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. And you can get stuck in that. And here's the thing. There is no, if you want to win, that's great. But then that means somebody's a loser. And that is not a good relationship dynamic. So yeah, again, that's a choice too, right there.
And speaking about losing, this is something that I tell my congregation all the time. I'm like, holding on to resentment and anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
When you talk about somebody's going to lose, you are the first loser. If you hold on to your anger, I remember having a client that told me, what do you mean I have to let go of resentment? I have a right to be angry. And I said, you absolutely do. We all have a right to being angry, sad. We all have a right to our emotions. Yeah. But if we decide to stay in anger, if we decide to stay in sadness, the first person impacted by that is going to be us.
Yeah.
And we can stick to it as long as we understand what the potential consequences are.
Yeah. Yeah. And anger is a good emotion because it does warn us, hey, something's wrong. If something's going on here, you need to do something. It's a good thing. Just don't want to get stuck in that.
Exactly. In our case, the anger and the angst that we were having in our relationship is what ultimately brought us to you, Marybeth. So you're absolutely right. Our emotions are a gift. And our emotions allow us to understand that something needs to change, that something needs to be modified, that something needs to end. But what we do with those emotions is what's going to determine what happens with our lives. And I always tell people, allow your emotions to inform your decisions. Just don't let them in the driver's seat. Because if we allow, in this world, Marybeth, that's a constant message. Follow your heart. It's one of the most aggravating phrases. Like, if you really, really want to upset me, say that in front of me, because we don't follow our hearts for most issues. And then when it comes to big life decisions, we're telling people, follow your heart. This morning I didn't feel like getting out of bed. If I had followed my heart, I would have stayed in bed, not come to work, and probably get myself fired in the process, right? There's so many things that we should not be following our hearts, and we are following our hearts. And I think one of the reasons so many families, so many marriages, so many people are in crisis nowadays is because they are following their hearts. They feel an emotion, they run with that emotion. But the good Lord gave us a thinking mind, right? So that like creates an anchor for our emotions, which can be very crazy at times.
Yeah, exactly. And your emotions, I think someone once told me, like, your emotions will get on and off the bus, right? They get on and off. So you don't stay with that emotion. No one is sad for 36 straight hours. You might, you have different emotions that pop up. And the other thing is, you can have two contradicting emotions at one time, right? You can be grieving and you can be hopeful. Mm-hmm. You can be, they can be together. And so it's super complex. But yes, you don't want to get stuck in that. So yeah, so we worked together. I can't even remember how long you guys came, but and I've said this before, but Jenny like threw herself into healing. She like got the books and listened to sermons and read the Bible and did journaling, and just she threw herself into the healing process.
You made me cry, Marybeth.
Well, and
girl,
but you did the work, and I don't think your husband, he was in it, like, he wanted to do it, but he jump on the healing train quite as quickly as
Oh,
you
no,
did.
no. John said, oh, good. She now knows she's crazy. I'm going to let her work on herself. And I'm not saying that he didn't do anything, but I think he was relieved to know that I was finding answers. And he said, my husband was an avid reader, as you know, Marybeth. And he
Yeah.
said, oh, I have all that information. I have all those books. Not that he was reading and applying them, but he had the knowledge. So he, like you say, Marybeth, he saw my intensity in healing and self-discovery. And he's like, I think this tango is only going to take one person.
Well, and here's the interesting thing, and this happened in my early in my 30s. I went to counseling, right? And I threw myself into the healing train, and I made some huge progress, and that impacted my marriage in such a positive way, even though my husband didn't make any change. And I think that was the same thing with you. Your
100%.
marriage was impacted huge by just the healing that you did. And so I want to encourage listeners, like, if you are stuck in a relationship that feels hard, don't concentrate on the other person, concentrate on you, and you fix yourself. And either that person becomes healthy and joins you, or something else happens. But just worry about yourself.
Marybeth, I remember asking you that question, and the answer was exactly what you just shared. I said, Marybeth, I'm putting a lot of work, I'm concentrating. I don't see John putting a lot of effort. And I remember saying, do you think my marriage can be saved if I'm the only person putting in the work? And you gave me exactly the same answer. You said, Jenny, you only have control over one person, and that person is you. So you focus on you, work on you, and at some point, you will decide whether, and you were absolutely right. My marriage improved by a humongous percentage, and it took John years to really start getting his own healing seriously. But by then, our marriage had improved so much. And it was only because I had changed. I wasn't looking at him the same way. I was not always expecting the worst. I was no longer looking at myself as a victim. I understood why some of the things he said or did were triggering me. And I realized that it not necessarily had to do with him. He was never a perfect man, just as I was never a perfect woman. But I think our upbringing and all the trauma that we had gone through was really exacerbating the way we were reading each other. And so that's why you were so instrumental, Marybeth, in getting me in the right road of recovery and self-awareness. And it definitely made an impact in our marriage, even before John realized I had significant healing to do too.
And so, yeah, so you guys came, you did your thing, and in the background, I'm healing and getting better. And I was on IV antibiotics and all of that stuff, but I was slowly getting better. And then I think I graduated you guys from counseling, right? You got your completion certificate, and then I think, was it your idea or my idea that I would do some groups at your church surrounding like emotional healing?
Yeah, well, and for this is obviously a podcast that's open to everybody, but for those listeners that are believers that have a specific faith, what I discovered is that the church, lacked a lot in the area of emotional intelligence, emotional healing. And it's sad because by the time John and I came to Marybeth, we were not only Christians, but we were pastors. We had a lot of knowledge on the Word of God and whatever, and we still were completely oblivious to what trauma was and how it was impacting our relationship. So yeah, I think that I brought it up to you, Marybeth, that this was really lacking in the church. We needed this information to get out. We needed to help people. And you said, yeah, that's a great idea. And then we started doing like emotional healing sessions with a tilt towards scripture together, the three of us.
Yes. Yeah. And so we just, I think we did like Healing as a Choice, the study, and we did Breaking the Cycle study, and I think we did a boundary study, and
Yes.
we did another one on anger. We did one on anger too.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
lots of healing happening. And what I love about doing something together with groups with multiple people is that supercharges your healing, because you get to pick up other people's wisdom and knowledge, and so that kind of is a supercharge to your healing process.
You know, a dream of mine, speaking of that, at some point is for us to start holding retreats of emotional healing retreats with our listeners, because as you say, there's not only power in our story, but there's power when we get together and all that good stuff. But I think, Marybeth, as we start wrapping up our episode about how we met and how our lives collided, I think that one of the common themes, and obviously, at least at the beginning of our relationship, you were limited because you were seeing us as a coach, but then you and I became friends. And obviously, at the beginning, I was vulnerable and transparent to you because that's what we were supposed to do. You were our coach. But then when you and I got together as friends and we no longer had a professional relationship, then you and I were free to be more open and more vulnerable with each other. And we started sharing stories and just doing life together. So what can you say about that?
Yeah, well, that was such a beautiful transition for our relationship. And then yes, allowed me to take down the professional barrier and to share my heart with you.
Yes.
And I can remember several instances in my healing journey where I would call you crying about my life and that. And then when we ended up needing to move to Arizona because of an issue that my husband was going through, that's a whole nother story. I can remember sitting on your couch and crying, like I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to fix this, and just, and you didn't fix it for me either, but just having that, I was able to share with a safe person who just would say like it's gonna be okay and you're gonna be okay, and that was just a huge thing for us. And so even and then I think when I moved, we kind of kept pretty good contact. And then, distance is hard and life gets in the way, but we've managed to stay together and share our story. When something happens that's hard to me, Jenny's the first person I want to call. So, and I know that you have the same thing. When something hard happens, like we want to share that with each other and be vulnerable, and
Yeah.
there's huge blessing in that.
And something that has really helped you and me is that we've been extremely intentional about our friendship. Like, you're right, life takes over and we can't communicate anymore. But then we started like putting in an agenda, like I'm gonna call you every month, and asking questions about each other. And I think, this is another powerful message for our viewers and listeners too. It's like, be intentional about your healing, be intentional about the relationships that you have. And when you find a good relationship, something that really builds you up and edifies you, then stick to it and find a way to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we wrap up, the importance of finding that safe person, that person who is going to be your person, who's not going to spread your stuff all over, but just be there for you, is hugely important too.
Absolutely important. And so we want to leave our listeners and viewers with the message that there's power in vulnerability, there's power in transparency, there's power in reaching out to others for help, right? And so both Marybeth and I, Marybeth from a relationship coach and counselor perspective, me from an emotional intelligence and life coach perspective, we're always here to support you and help you. We can do it professionally on an individual basis. If you have the need, reach out to us. But we also are trying to do exactly the same through this podcast. And as we advance, as we said at the beginning, we are going to be giving each and every one of you the opportunity to come to this circle and share your story, because we believe that there is power in that transparency and that vulnerability, and that hopefully, just as you guys are learning from our stories, we'll be able to learn from yours as well as other people. Marybeth?
Yeah, and Jenny, real quick, is I guess we should tell people how to reach out to us. That would be
Yes,
helpful, right? So
that's a great.
we each individually have our own individual practices that you can reach out. And so my website is my name, marybethsteigenga.com. So that's a good way to reach me.
Absolutely.
And then how
Spell
do
your
people,
name, Marybeth, although it's on the screen, but just again, just to be sure.
I know it's that Dutch heritage name there. So it's Steigenga, Steigenga. So marybethsteigenga.com is my website.
Yeah. And when we edit this video, we will put the website there by your name. And mine is Enhance for Life. So it's enhance, the number 4, and life.info. And also at the end and at the beginning of this podcast, you will see our email address for the podcast that is being displayed so that you can reach out to us and we can support and help you out and tell us, like, if you are interested in your story being spotted, be one of the first ones, and we can't wait to do that.
Yeah,
So I
super.
guess that's it for this podcast, Marybeth.
That is it. And I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.
Beautiful. I'm looking forward to it. And now we say bye to everybody. Take care, guys.
All
Bye-bye.
right, bye-bye.